Zebra. I'm representing the Education Committee, and I just wanted to introduce Annie Spong, who has come to join us to teach us about intimacy coordinating and how we can be better costumers on set and more informed. And you actually started out in costumes. Please welcome Annie. Yes. And this is also, just so you guys know, this is a recorded class. And I know there's going to be a lot of conversations and questions and answers and all that kind of stuff. So just know that you are going to be recorded. But only for 7:05 viewing. So, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hi. I'm Annie Spong, and I'm a 7:05 key costumer, as well as an intimacy coordinator. And just a little background on me. I came into this world through print and fashion. I was a fashion editor for Marie Claire, European version. And through that, I started working with a lot of photographers doing their print advertising, and then it went into their commercials as they became commercial. And so that's how I got into the union, was doing commercials. And I am a mom, so I stayed in the commercial world for the most part because I wanted the latitude and flexibility of that lifestyle. And then as things went on and my son's gotten older, I've gotten on shows and so on and so forth. So that is a little bit of my background. And it's been an amazing, really diverse career. And, you know, I've stayed in the print world as well as commercials and being in TV and film. And, you know, people always ask, you know, what do you love about it? I said, I love the diversity. I love the people. I love that I'm always thinking on my feet. I love creating things. I love starting with like, I don't know how this is going to work out, to like, there it is. Wow, that's pretty cool. And the most fun things for me were probably early in my career, having no or little to no budget out of my, sorry about that, out of my closet, literally my own closet or whatever, scraps of fabric and make things. Such a fun experience. But looking back now, being an intimacy coordinator, you know, there were so many times early in my career doing music videos and so on, as well as currently, where you can see that the lines are very blurry around this world of nudity and simulated sex and consent and authenticity and transparency, and how our industry has really tried not to be transparent about what they're up to in some aspects. And that really was hurting me. As often because being that person on set or in the position to have the access and the relationships with actors, I was often asked, do you think they might be okay if we tried it like this? I'm really like, that's really not a question for me. But I was put in that position so many times, and, you know, having to read the room about like, are you going to lose the actor if we ask this question? Or so that when this intimacy coordinating kind of burst forth in 2017, 2018, you know, coinciding with the Me Too movement, a friend of mine at HBO, because they were one of the very early adopters, said, you are perfectly suited for this position. Have you take a look at it, because we are going this direction. And you have the emotional intelligence and the demeanor and the experience that lends itself to this. And I was like, well, I'm already doing this. You know, this is already a job I've been doing as part of my role. So then I was like, okay, let's like take a deeper look. So that is how I landed here. I still work in both worlds. My insurance is my non-insurance right now is through 7:05. You know, I'm like 1,000 hours away from lifetime. So it's like, you know, it's like those things I need to cross that finish line, as well as maintain my expansion and role in intimacy coordinating. Being as though I started in the early, at the front of this, I've had the privilege of working with some other intimacy coordinators and people that kind of came together to figure out, like, okay, how do we create a community and how do we create training that is meaningful and effective and universal. And that has definitely been a work in progress, because as as costumers, we all come to this from some from a theater background, some from fine art background, some from just curiosity, and I like doing things. And so all of those things aren't the same, but they all add value. And so whether it was people coming from a therapeutic world that were interested in intimacy coordinating, or stunt coordinators or costumers, we each came with something different. And so figuring out like what that training looks like and what that landscape is still really different for everybody. And the amount of intimacy coordinators that, just have very different experience from, I have a tremendous amount of experience working with actors and, working with them intimately. And that's not necessarily a stunt coordinator's experience or a fight director. They don't have that. They know how to choreograph a scene and how to like make it safe and like do the masking, but maybe not how to talk to an actor. And like all of these things come into play. So like figuring it out has been like the process of the last 5 or 6 years. Like, okay, how do we do this so that we actually have something cohesive? And so my intention for this is to make it as conversational as possible. I want you to feel like you can ask, and share your experience. And if I can help troubleshoot, I don't have all the answers, but I have a lot of experience. And so Michelle.
Are intimacy coordinators unionized or not?
Not yet. We are teed up to navigate that, and that's in process.
So is there a group of coordinators that get together so is there some kind of committee or something like that any of us would want to be involved in?
I'm on the leadership committee of that movement. Okay. So I'm on the front end of like creating that. Once we cross that threshold of navigating union status and that, then I believe there will be more pathway to include, people to participate as we create different kinds of committees. But yes, we are supported and being guided, and it's been in process for a couple of years. And with the strike, and we've really had to pause so we didn't get shuffled into the fray of that. Yeah. And that was intentional and frustrating. The reason for intimacy coordinators, I'm sure many of you understand, but just in a macro sense, is that prior to 2017, 2018, there was no advocacy or safety on set when we had nudity or simulated sex or hyperexposure. And just like crashing a car, where we have a stunt coordinator that's making sure the pedestrians are safe, the people in the car are safe, and that, everyone around knows the action that's going to happen so that you can maintain a certain level of safety. There was not that when it came to intimacy and nudity. And that became really illuminated in 2017, 2018. It had been happening for a long time, and it was really harmful. And the power dynamics were atrocious. And for me, the things that were happening were, we're on set, everything's lit, the actor's there, and then there's an ask from a producer or a showrunner or a director, do you think we could try, to me, do you think we could try it like this? And I was just like, oh, like, okay, so what? I'm supposed to ask the actor in this moment if we can try it partially nude? This is not what we were doing. So that was, those kinds of circumstances were happening all the time. And what I find now is that as when I'm asked to join a project, it's not in unison what where that intersection is. Every projection is a little different, and the education for writers, producers, showrunners, directors, UPMs is all really different. So it's really helpful as designers, if you're getting scripts that you're breaking down and you see these scenes, make that email to your producers. Who's the intimacy coordinator? I need to speak to them. Like when they get the information about the breakdown of the scene, we need to discuss, because I'm going to need to be prepared with modesty garments, or what the agreement is, what the consent level is with the actor. So what occurs, or what should occur, is that potentially we could come in at casting. If a show knows that they're going to have intimacy and simulated sex. And what happens then is that I can have conversations with potential casts that they want to hire to find out the level of consent. At that point, I've been asked to consult on shows where people have already been hired. And in episode 8, there is a consummation of a relationship. And that actor is a hard no for the activities that they are asking about. And, you know, the pushback and the power dynamic from a showrunner to me, thankfully I'm in between the actor, is why not? And I'm like, I can't, that's not something I'm going to disclose. That's their preference. And is there another way we can tell the story? And I said, perhaps that's something to ponder for a little bit. Maybe we can circle back, or if you know already that that's not okay. But these are the kinds of power dynamics that, as an intimacy coordinator, I am fielding instead of the actor. You know, so that the goal is to take that out of the equation, so the actor's free to be an actor and not in a position of a hire fire conversation with a producer.
Is that conversation only verbal, or do they give you like storyboards to show you exactly what they have in mind, so you can physically see what they're thinking?
This particular incident, the episode was not written. It was based off of a book. So the conversation was verbal. I had the synopsis, and I had them put in writing so I could share it with the actor, what the explanation of the scene was and how that activity was going to support the story. Because not only is it having consent with an actor and creating that space, it's also, is this contributing to the story? Is also a conversation that I've had with showrunners or writers. It's like, how does this contribute? Because we don't have consent.
So the consent is also done in writing, so that you got a paper trail.
Yes. So what happens is that I will come in either ideally at casting, but often that's not happening yet. But if not, then I'll come in prior to production when a script is coming out and you guys are going into pre-production, and I'm asked to break down the script. So just like you guys, I'll go through the script and I'll highlight the areas that I think there are hyperexposure, nudity, or simulated sex, or anything like that. And often, as you know, reading script notes, it's like, it was hot and they had sex, is all you get. And I'm like, okay, well, that's not quite enough information. So being able to go back at that moment with the writer or the showrunner, who's ever making these decisions, and say, let's walk through the script and let's walk through these activities. And are we talking about implied? Are we talking about simulated sex? How much nudity are we talking about? Are we talking about implied nudity? You know, where is this? What's the duration of it? How long are we talking about? Are we talking about 2 beats? Are we talking about a minute and a half? Is the energy flow mutual, or is she dominant, or are they dominant, or is it is this a power thing? Is he her boss? Whatever, it's just so like I can understand like what energy is coming to this helps me have conversations with the actors. So once I have that information from a writer, director, and often, as we know, it's like sex and simulated sex and talking about it are challenging for people. So I will have conversations with writers, and sometimes there's cultural things. I did Beef, and the creator was Korean, and he was like, I'd start asking these questions. I could see his face. He would be like, I don't have these conversations with people. And so to then find a way to soften that so he could actually speak to what his vision was is part of my role. Like, this isn't about, shaming anybody for their sexuality or their intention. It's all fair game. You've heard the term like, oh, intimacy coordinators are the sex police. And it's like, actually, no. Like, so that's not my role. My role is to support your vision. And the best way I can support your vision is with transparency. And that is something that as an industry, we all can work together to actually keep asking for, because we know the levels of the veils of information that we get, and it's not a level playing field, and it's not transparent. So like asking a writer to be transparent about what their vision is in this scene when it says they're hot and they had sex, but you're a 65-year-old white guy, that is not the same as the demographic of these characters. So how does that translate for you? And how can I support that so that when I have the conversations, it's clear. So from that information, from breaking down a script and like having the notes on each specific scene, and I have a list of questions, and it's usually, I try to keep it as conversational as possible. Oftentimes, if they're the writer, I'll get more nuance of like their own history that I'm like, oh, okay. And sometimes that's an emotional intelligence and a discernment that's a piece that's hard to teach other intimacy coordinators. It's like being a really good therapist. It's like, it just comes from like having that's being able to hold that space in a different way. But with that, I can then go and have conversations with the actors independently. So it goes from me fleshing out the script and getting as clear as possible with an actor. The writer or creator, and then having independent conversations with the actors about like, okay, in this scene, the vision is that it's full simulated sex with full nudity for a duration of 30 seconds. And the predominant energy is him coming towards you. And the idea is that we're going to see you from behind. We're going to see full length, whatever. So I go through all of it. And then with that, do you want to take a minute? Do you want to talk tomorrow? Do you want to think about this? Because I don't want you to consent to anything until you've really thought it through. This is all fair game. You get to say no to any of it and all of it. And consent is always something that you can, take back. You can always come back and say no, right up until the moment we're shooting. And I make that really clear, that your consent is the only way this goes forward. And your full consent, So like I'm sensitive to I've worked with some young actresses that are like, I really want to do it. I said, but I hear the hesitation. So let's pause. What about this isn't working? I don't want my nipples exposed. I don't want to be seen from the waist down. Great. All of those things are negotiable. Like I can go back and say, so I'll have this conversation with the actor and you stop me if it's not clear and if you want more explanation about this specific scene. And then I will probably go through whether it's an episode or the entire film with the actor or what we're shooting, what segment we're on, whatever. And then I'll go back to the creator and say, okay, this is where the consent is right now with this actor. They're not comfortable with full nudity. They would be comfortable if you shot from the back, waist up. They're fine with that kind of nudity. They're fine with their legs. They don't want any hip or buttock exposure. Is there a way we can tell the story? And if they are like, oh, whoa, I'm like, okay, what about that? I can make a recommendation on ways we could potentially tell the story if there's an opening there. But that's not my role. Like I'm not the creative person, but I'm happy to help navigate like you are as costumers. Like, listen, if I can help mask something so an actor feels better, great. So that's how those conversations come into play. And to your point, Michelle, when that comes into an agreement, that language of what the consent is and what is visually being seen and what activities are going to be occurring, I will work with the legal team on the show to create language that goes into a nudity and simulated sex writer that gives the parameters of what we can and cannot do on set in this scene. So that, and that writer, once it's drafted, needs to be in the hand of the actor 48 hours prior to shooting. That's my job, to make sure that happens. And that is for the reason that the actors have the opportunity to really consider, do I feel safe? You have a question? Can you tell me your name?
Asia.
Asia. Hi, Asia.
I worked with a situation where I wasn't allowed to talk to the actress because they were like, we need an intimacy coordinator. It's going to be you today. And I'm like, great, that's not how that works, but I'll try to, help and facilitate where I can. And I couldn't speak to the actress personally. I could only speak to her manager. And the problem became that, yes, I broke down the script. I got what you said, like the duration, the beats and stuff like that, but it wasn't being translated correctly via the manager to the actress. So it became a situation of just mix-ups. And so, like you said, you want to speak to the actor or, the person personally. What's the hierarchy there? If they refuse to talk to you until they get to set, okay, so we're not doing that. I mean, that's fine by me.
I'm not. This is not proxy. Like I'm not doing this remotely.
Yeah.
Like if I don't have your consent and you and I aren't looking eye to eye and having this conversation about your body and the exposure of your body and someone who might be touching your body and how they might be touching your body in a room full of people, then it's not going to move forward. So that takes a lot of confidence on the intimacy coordinator's position because the power dynamics are huge. Whether it's a big actor who's like, speak to the hand, you're like, okay. There are some actors that are like, I'm fine. I don't need an intimacy coordinator. Whether they've done this previously. I've worked with a number of people who did a lot of high-profile sex scenes. And so they're like scratching their head like, I'm not sure what you're doing here, And So to be in that space, and like, I remember it took a few hours, but he finally said, okay, Annie, tell me the story. Why are you here? And so I broke it down for him, and it took it, and he was like, oh, I get it. It's for the women. And I said, actually, yes, it's for the women. And it's also for you. And, but this is, perspective is crazy, but also like as a white man, he knew he held power, whether he knew that or not. So it had never not been an issue for him. He never didn't have that position. So he didn't understand it. And I said, well, except for, how about this scenario? Or, and he finally was like, by the end, he was like, oh, I'm so glad you're here. But it's not always the case. There are people that are like, they're like, feel like it's going to interrupt the creative process. Instead of letting the script notes fly and we'll just see what happens, they have hot sex. Well, you mean you're not going to have a conversation with your scene partner about what might happen here? This is improv?
What hot sex might be.
Right, or feel like,
Thinks,
or how about
you think hot sex is? It's not always hot sex.
Right,
So,
and how about if your partner has trauma in their history?
Yes. Yeah.
Or has a shoulder injury, or doesn't want to be touched in a certain way? Like, all of those things are conversations that I have. Like, are you allergic to latex? Are you, these kinds of things. Like, when we figure out modesty garments for you, are there things, do you have a preference? Have you ever used any? Do you like tape over adhesive? Do you like to get waxed if they're doing, certain types of coverings? So to all these nuances of the work. Yeah.
Question to it. So back to the hierarchy. Who are you reporting to? If they say, I'm not feeling comfortable in this, are you going to your first? Are you going to you say you're going to the creator, but if the creator, say the writer is not on set, who do you go to then? Who's your next?
I would be producer, director. So yeah, like the first is somebody that for me is going to be a practical, logistics point person for me, but they're not somebody I'm going to talk to about, well, if there's a breach in consent or something like that, or the actors changed their mind on the day, I would go for the first and say, you need to reconfigure your schedule because we don't have this fully locked in yet. And but my report would be whoever I'm creator, writer, producer. Young people want to become intimacy coordinators. Now, this is a big girl panty job. And I don't want you to dissuade people, but that's a hard position to be in when a producer, it's midnight and they want to get the scene and the actor has not signed their nudity rider because it hasn't. I'm like, we're not moving forward. And they're like, we have to get this. I'm like, I understand. But your actor hasn't signed the nudity rider and his agent hasn't signed off on it. And so that's something that you have to navigate before we're going to do this. And that can be ugly and uncomfortable.
Well, wouldn't the legalities of that and the signatures for all that be done before the day of shooting?
They need to have the rider in hand. They don't need to sign it before we shoot, prior to shooting.
Oh, okay.
So, and sometimes there's been some shift or change in it or addition or the dates change, it's specific to a date. So if the dates change that, it's I get that, and I'm pretty good about preempting stuff and say, I know this scene is coming up. The writer has not been signed yet. are there questions about it? Because I will have talked to the actor. If the actor's like, no, I just need my agents to make sure that they're, I'm like, then production needs to figure out getting the agent available to look at this.
So you're not the one that is actually physically giving them the paper or emailing them the paper or whatever?
No, they usually copy me on that email that it's gone to the actor.
From the legal department?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And every legal department's a little bit different, Michelle.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them are really savvy and some of them have no idea. So I have seen, it's like they want to send out a blank writer that says nudity and simulated sex and nothing specific. I'm like, yeah, that's not the conversation I described to you. So we need to get specific about this because that's not what's being agreed to.
So I was on a show and there was a lot of nudity. So they had a lot of people walking around the pool and they wanted people that would be comfortable being totally nude. So they hired porn stars. And we had an intimacy coordinator, but the director, it was his first time directing, and he decided that he wanted to have one of the porn stars do an activity that wasn't scripted or hadn't been discussed. And so he was a porn star, and so he actually did not simulate, but actually did the activity, which they had to cut, of course. And I wonder, there was an intimacy coordinator on that, so how did that director get away with requesting that?
Well, the only thing I can think of is like when I've worked with adult stars who work in pornography, I make it really clear when they're on set that nothing we are going to do is practical. If anything is asked, it's going to be simulated. Okay. And nothing's going to actually be consummated here. Okay. So the other piece of that is that where was the intimacy coordinator in that particular situation? Sometimes if there's a lack of transparency or the director is afraid of any sort of input, they might have not included that person. Okay. We're still finding that sneakiness in the industry, and that's what I'm talking about. The lack of transparency is pervasive. It's like people are afraid that we're going to stop what they want to do. So they don't want to disclose what they want to do. But our rule is to keep people safe. And I can't keep people safe if you're not being transparent about what you're going to ask. And I, as an intimacy coordinator, I'm going to be there for all intimate scenes. But if you choose to do something outside the box and ask, then if I'm not aware of it and nobody's called me, costumes hasn't called me, or, then not just costumes, but an AD, anybody who actually has some, not power, but how about just ethics? How about just plain ethics? Humanity. Like, this is the piece for me that, like, we are responsible to each other to make sure that we're safe. We're safe on set, so those kinds of ethics and holding each other in that space, like, if there's something that's awry, we need to have the intimacy coordinator here. Where are they? That's why I think breaking down your scripts and making the call or the email to the UPM or producer, hey, who's the intimacy coordinator? I'm interested in connecting. They may not have hired them yet. Regine? Hi, Regine.
I may have been working on that same thing or something very similar, in which they, the AD team decided there were some people fully naked and a lot of people fully clothed, and they were like, that doesn't make sense, we need more naked people. And so to the background, went around and were like, do you want to be naked? I'll give you an extra bump of this much. Yeah. And
you did to the background.
No,
the AD did.
There was an intimacy coordinator, but it seems like they weren't really it was more for the principals and not for the background. And then we were really not equipped to run around and then, you know, in between
Robe them.
like give them, we didn't have enough manpower.
Yeah.
I mean, how do we deal with that? Like, it was very uncomfortable for everybody.
So again, just to support you and thank you for sharing, because it's such an uncomfortable place to be, you know.
Well, they're shivering. It's
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
I mean, let's talk about just the inhumane piece. If they were in a swimsuit, that's not okay, let alone nude. But no one should be on set without a nudity rider if there's nudity or simulated sex. If you're being asked to do that or you see that happening, that's, you know, that is like an ethical call to the production and AD team. And like, send an email, make a paper trail, call SAG, you know, call.
when you're a day play
I know.
additional.
Yeah.
But do the anonymous call, have the whole department send an email. Like, you know, I'm just giving you suggestions. I know it's hard because to be singled out then for holding a space for safety and then not to be rehired. It's just, I think in the long run, if we support each other in that space of like, how do we create safety for everyone? This is not safe for people. They don't have the right, they cannot consent in the moments.
Background people are often paid so much less.
Correct.
Of $700 more to be naked. Like,
In a situation like that, for me, if I was there and the AD said, hey, we're thinking about offering more of a bump if we can ask the background, I was like, you know what, time out. That's something you can do. So like my job is to support you in your vision, but each one of them needs a nudity rider signed before you shoot anything. It needs to be very specific that what we're doing in the latitude, and you need to provide covering in between. You know, it's like, so that is my role. It's not, it's a whole nother, correct.
We need comfort, and that's a whole, we need
Yeah,
two extra
you
background people, you know.
exactly.
Like
Can we do this tomorrow? Okay, yes, you can. Like I was released off a show because in the moment we had I see you. In the moment we had gotten to a scene where the actors, there was a simulated sex over clothes, and she was reaching down towards his crotch, and the director turned to me and she goes, I want her to put her hand inside his pants. And I said, well, we can do that. It's just not going to be today. Because it was in the moment and she wanted this to happen. Well, that was the end of my working with them. And that is because I was willing to say, this is a protection. It had not been a conversation. I wasn't going to ask her on set. I wasn't going to navigate that. It was not part of the deal, or him. They replaced me with somebody I know very, very well, and I told her the whole, so she goes, so they're getting the same thing. I'm going to hold the same space for them. So, and they were not happy with her either. But this is what it's like the Wild West. You know, we're pushing up against this power dynamic that's used to getting what they want. And so the more we can hold a space of ethics and trueness and safety for each other, the quicker it will transcend, but not easy.
When the actors send the writer, do they send a copy to you as well? I know that you're
Yes.
made aware, but do they send the exact work?
Yes. Yes. Yeah, and I usually literally am with the actor and see the signed copy. I always make sure I have a signed copy before we shoot.
The way that we have ratios of how many costumers per actors, are there a ratio of how many intimacy coordinators per actors and background actors on set at the time in different layers of clothing?
That was one of my questions.
There's no specific outline for that yet. Although I have been on shows where there's a brothel scene and there's a lot going on, where there were several of us. I think, a couple of us were working with background and one was working with principals, as what I recall. But for me, that's something, as the head of a department, I would ask, okay, for this scene, we're going to need 3 more people.
And that's something that they, like, it's not something you have to fight for, that's something that they've been amenable to?
It depends on the show. Sometimes they're pushed back as to why. I'm like, because you have 15 nude people. And that's, but when this is, this is too where the intersection of intimacy and costumes comes into play. I said to Whitney earlier, I think, when you're breaking down that script, find out, ask production, curious. Who's your intimacy coordinator? I want to connect with them on the script so that we're all prepared. So we can talk about, modesty garments and, what the actor's comfort level is. And also when there's scenes like this, that we have coverage and we support each other.
Is there an explicitly written out code of ethics for intimacy coordinators? Or is it kind of up to your judgment?
A lot of it, as you can see from different intimacy coordinators, in people's experience, it's kind of right now. It's is there a code of ethics for costume department? Right. Not really. Yeah. It's really depends on your designer and how they lay out the department.
So in that instance you were talking about, they could have fired you and found another intimacy coordinator who was okay with just going up to the actor on the day and saying, "Hey, we're going to do it this way."
It's illegal.
Oh.
It's illegal to do that. So the 48-hour rule with the writers, I can get around that by calling SAG and also looping in their agent and making sure everyone is aware. So there's transparency that, okay, they're being asked this. SAG is aware of it and says, okay, that's fine, because we were already in a scene that they want to change. But it's going to take a couple hours, right? Potentially for that to happen. And so I will let an AD and a producer know we can go that direction, but we're going to need a little bit of latitude to do that. And most of the time how annoyed they are with that idea. But that's part of the deal. You can have what you want, but let's make sure everybody's safe.
To be specific, that's after they sign the writer, it's 48 hours, or if it's before?
They need to
They could change it on the day, so you would have already signed it, but.
They need to have the nudity writer 48 hours prior to the scene shooting. So if tomorrow at 2 is their call, then 2 days prior, 48 hours, they need to have that in hand. Now, some of that gets fudged depending on timing, if they were late cast, et cetera. But as a rule, that is now a legality. But I'm happy to put that in a document for you guys so you can see the guidelines of using an intimacy coordinator and what is needed. That, it's also in there that no genital to genital contact is ever legal. So having a barrier, which includes costumes in that, is necessary.
Just because, we've all worked on productions that you have to actually show them that one of the unions is going to grieve them before they'll listen. Yeah. And just saying you can't do that isn't enough.
Right.
So actually having the written down where it is in SAG, and or just because sometimes you can call a SAG rep and sometimes you can't.
Yeah.
Like who's gonna come to Santa Clarita at 3 o'clock in the morning for the orgy scene at on True Blood?
Tell me your name.
Raquel.
Thanks, Raquel.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to email everybody and send you those parameters, because those things are, because this is such a new field, it's imperfect and it's happening, consistently. So when this new contract came into play, there was some adjustments in those rules, the guidelines for SAG.
Does that written guideline also like go into when you happen to, they have had the writer, but now we want to make a change to it, we still need approval from these?
I don't know if it goes into that specifically. They're in the new guidelines. It does say you have to make your best effort to have an intimacy coordinator present. So that means it's not a solid rule, but you have to best effort is a legal term that means you have to make the effort to get somebody present.
But like if you're suddenly, we want to hand down the pants, and you need to get approval from their agent and SAG and such, but is that listed in the little statute?
Oh, the changes?
Yes,
No, it's not. It's,
being like, well, it's not there.
well, but what is in there is that the nudity rider needs to be in place with what activities are happening. And, unzipping somebody's pants and putting your hand in their pants is very different than skimming over the clothing. So, and that's a consent for both people in a very different way.
So let's take that example. I want the hands down the pants. We do it tomorrow. Okay, we move it to tomorrow. So they write a new contract up saying, now we're putting hands down the pants.
So what I would do is I'd have a conversation. I would go directly to the creator, whoever that person is, and I'd say, tell me a little bit more about this. Maybe it's the director who has this idea. This is what I want. I want her to do this. I want her to take control of the scene, Then I would, after I have that information, I would have conversations with the actors independently. This is what the vision is. Is this something that you feel comfortable and consensual with?
Yeah.
Right? If there's no consent, we're not doing it.
Oh, yeah. So say they're writing, you're talking with them and they say, what if they want to do it this way or this way? Do you talk about potential different ways that you can then put in to a contract? So if the director's like, okay, now I need you to try to put your hands down his pants, or let's just do the one over the pants, or are you talking about maybe three different shots or three different ways you could do it and give them options? Or is it just, it's going to be just this?
I think it's case by case. And what I mean by that is it depends on how collaborative the writer director is and how much capacity they have for their own comfort with sexuality. Because again, it depends. Some people can really speak to it and they're like very clear, and some people are like, oh, no. And I'm like, okay, that's not gonna cut it.
As far as the full breadth and width of nudity and layers of undress, I'm curious because we're talking about adults right now, but say we have, say a scene with a bunch of kids and now the director wants them all like running around in their underwear, like it's a comedy or something like that. Is that something that we say, it's honest, you have managers and guardians to talk to as well, but is that something that like we can't even discuss that until an intimacy coordinator, like was that something that you would also be involved with?
You should make sure they hire an intimacy coordinator whenever there's a minor in a swimsuit, in a bathtub, in any situation where there's any experience like that could happen.
Okay.
And this is unfortunately a pretty gray area still. Because from my understanding is the hierarchy is studio teacher, and then me, and then, and parents. But I have worked on things where the studio teacher hasn't even read the script, so they have no idea what's being asked at all. And so again, for me, there's been a collaboration of working with the studio teacher on, okay, there's a simulated masturbation scene with a teenage boy. And, how do you navigate? You can't do it. You can't do it. They're underage, you can't do it, period. You can't imply it. But it's all super gray. Like SAG does not have a definition of nudity yet. Nudity is different for male genitalia people than it is for female genitalia. I spent literally 6 weeks on this teen masturbation scene with the legal team and HBO on like, how do we do this? And how do we have the likeness of a minor? Can you even do it? And they're like splitting legal hairs like to figure this out. And I was like, wow.
Well, wasn't it, at that point, wasn't it up to the actor?
The actor and the parents, yes.
And so,
But yes and no. Legally, there's some legalities about portrayal of a minor in any position like this.
so even if the actor is over 18 but playing a minor,
The portrayal of a minor in these situations, there's some legal, precedent that you can't do certain things.
Can you explain? I don't understand what you mean by portrayal of a minor. Do you mean an actor playing a minor?
Yeah.
Or a minor? Because could we get a body double to do this scene? Is that?
Well, see, this is where it gets gray. Some productions try to get away with that. Others try to follow the more ethical route of like, how do we do this and stay in the guidelines of, we're not supposed to use the portrayal of a minor in, pedophilia or nudity or, any sort of simulated situation. And people get around it. So whether they're using a body double or they're not casting a minor and using, and doing it and saying that that's how they're going to do it, it varies. And this is for me as an intimacy coordinator, it's tricky because I don't have a straight answer. Like talking to the legal team at Netflix is way different than talking to the legal team at HBO. So, and their version of this, it's like, are you really attorneys? But they skew it to their benefit and their desire. So, and then there's looping in SAG and what those protocols are, and looping in a studio teacher and what those guidelines. And in the Blue Book, for the studio teacher, there's nothing in there at all about nudity or simulated sex or that. Zero. Like I've read it. So it's up to the studio teacher's discretion. And those people have varying different experience and ethics and degrees.
And this might just go right back into that gray area, but things like a baby walking, like you have a baby, you're changing their diaper or they're getting out of a bathtub, like you see their butt. Like is that going into that gray area as well, or is that just kind of, it's a baby, so.
Well, see, there's all sorts of things. It's a kid, so what's the deal? They're in a bathing suit at the beach. So.
Yeah.
My question has to do with budgets.
Yeah.
Like, when they throw something at you that wasn't initially planned for, do you have a budget that you work with for modesty garments, or is it costume budget? Typically. And then a follow-up is like, let's say they want them to be nude and that wasn't previously planned for. If they want any kind of grooming, is that your budget? Do they look at you costumes for that budget? Do we share budgets? How does that work?
Typically, in general, the modesty garments are the role of costumes, but often you guys aren't even made aware of what that is because hasn't been the intersection early enough. So that's as a hard rule would be costumes. But I always have a kit, but I'm also a customer. So that I'm a little bit different in that way. And grooming, if there's a conversation with an actor that we've discussed this, I will let production know. And often they can then pay for it how they would like to, whether it's waxing or they need a merkin or prosthetics. That is all conversation. Hair and makeup would be my merkin people and prosthetics. But those are weeks out. Hopefully, right?
What's a merkin?
A merkin is
It's a pube wig.
It's to pay for the under.
if you don't want yourself exposed, you can have a merkin, which both male or female.
And isn't it also used to make people look period correct?
Correct.
Like I think
Yes,
70s.
for sure.
Yep.
Interesting.
Or 2024.
Yeah, whatever you can.
So does the hair department apply that?
Actually, it's makeup.
It is
It's
makeup.
makeup.
Oh, the makeup department.
Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Glue it on.
And again, that's a week, that takes some prep.
Is it MERKIN? Is that how you? Oh, okay. I never heard of that. Learn something new every day.
Sorry, the grouping of intimacy coordinators, are you guys on a union? What are you calling yourselves? Committee? What did you say?
Oh, I'm on the leadership committee for that group.
Okay, so when we say, oh, you have to contact an intimacy coordinators, like, what's the?
They're a group, so if you're suggesting,
What's the name of the?
okay, so there's a group, SAG-AFTRA took the lead on folding us into their realm and said we are going to create a list of certified intimacy coordinators. And what that meant was that there were that we had hours on certain types of shows that created enough experience. Not only did I have training, but I also had work experience. And that list is called Certified Intimacy Coordinators, and it's on the SAG-AFTRA site. I can put it in the email with you guys so you can see. Now that doesn't mean it's like anything. Just because you're it doesn't, there's lots of people that you don't have to be certified to be an intimacy coordinator. But being certified under SAG-AFTRA means that I have a certain amount of experience that they are recognizing. So producers often will only want to go to that list because it gives them a certain level of credibility.
Because I'm curious on that, and this is just my thinking, because it is such an intimate position with people and their, trust and trauma and all that. Are you guys considering, do people have to get background checked? Okay. Already right now they have to get background checked? Okay.
Yeah, I'm background checked, fingerprinted, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, for that specifically. Yeah. So that is part of the training and the certification. And
but that's not required yet of everybody.
To be certified, it is. Okay. So to be certified, there's like sensitivity training and diversity training and harassment and.
But there's no thing that says the production has to hire a certified over a non-certified?
Correct.
Got it.
Now, again, some of the front runners, HBO and Netflix have really sort of set the tone for that. And really that's kind of their go-to. They want certified people.
Well, that helps them legally.
Yes.
Yeah, no, and it helps with their exposure.
It's a liability.
Yes. Yeah.
And where do you get that training?
There's a couple different places now that do that kind of training, and there's a couple schools. And I'll put that in an email for you guys. You can kind of get a sense of it.
My friend took an online one.
Yeah, I think learning happens better in person, but I know COVID changed us.
She took it over COVID, so that's why I'm like, oh, okay. Should you meet with people?
Yeah.
Train that way?
Well, because so much of this work is people oriented and knowing how to meet people and be seen, but it's out there. So yeah, there are a couple different schools of training that you can become certified, but you need work experience to make it. I can go get a degree, but I'm
But work experience as a customer or?
as an intimacy coordinator.
So that's a catch-22.
Yes, I know. Very much so, because having a shadow in this work is really challenging because it's intimate. And personally for me, like a lot of people ask me, I've met with a ton of people who are curious about this work. And I have no interest in bringing anybody on set who doesn't have set experience or production experience. I just can't do it. I can't teach you that world. Like I need to do my job. I can't teach you where to find craft services or who the AD is, or find the costume department or.
So how did you transition into that? You had work experience as a costumer, but then you went for training, and then because you didn't work as a coordinator yet, so did you work as a coordinator on non-union things to get hours to?
I was at the very front end. So I was on some of the first productions that had intimacy coordinators, and it was like we were blazing a trail. Okay. And I think the fact that I had a lot of production experience and I knew where to get answers if I had questions, that made a huge difference. And I had worked with actors, so I had a lot of things stacked in my favor. Yeah. In terms of that. And also I had been fielding this as a costumer for so many years. So I knew actors weren't comfortable, and they weren't consensual for certain things. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. So
It's kind of like being at the forefront of something. You just figure it out. And we were creating training programs as we were doing it, because as you get into it, like I didn't recognize, for instance, because I knew how to do it, that some people have no production experience. I'm like, oh, well, that's for me. Like, you got to go be a PA for something. That's must, because otherwise, if you can't find the AD, it's all right if you don't.
Do you have a walkie on you?
This is me for my whole career. And they be like, here's your walkie. I'm like, oh, thanks. Yeah. and they're like, I just can't do it. But I'm usually anyway, that's me. I know that doesn't work for everybody. But.
I actually looked into doing intimacy coordinating, and when I looked into the all the classes that you have to take, there was a lot of stuff about psychology and trauma, and having to talk to people about trauma, especially intimacy trauma, because that kind of made me go, you know what? Personally, I don't know if this is a job I can do, because I personally don't know that I can talk about that kind of thing with someone. Yeah. So how do you how does that, I don't know what my question is. Yeah. How does it affect you, or how do you feel like that? How important is that to your?
It's really important.
Right?
And also, how do you feel people who say they want to do it, but then it's clear that they're giving the vibration that they're not really good at that?
Yeah, there's a lot of unhealed people that want to be helpers. Yeah. And it's not a good fit, because you can't be unraveling if you have a simulated rape scene, and that's your unhealed trauma. You can't do it. It's just not going to be safe for people. So it is dicey. There's no oversight for someone to come to me and say, okay, have you done your own work? Do you have sexual trauma in your history? Like, for me, I have been personally on an exploration of myself for many, many years. So like the nuances of my self-awareness and my healed parts are pretty known to me. I know there's always more, but that's not something that I, hold as like, just don't go over there. But, I have been on sets where I'll do a safety meeting where I will explain to the crew, we're doing a simulated rape scene today. If this is something that's uncomfortable to you, or you have previous trauma with, or talk to the head of your department and step off. You do not need to be here. It is not worth re-traumatizing yourself, and it's really for your safety. I have also been on sets where I worked on The Sympathizer, and there was a lot of cultural, historic things on that set where I went to the creators and I said, you must have somebody available, because these people portraying these events are the grandchildren of the people this happened to. And we don't know how much of that trauma got passed along. And so you have to be able to hold that space and like ask for those things, which they did.
So they had a therapist on set?
They had a cultural consultant and a therapist available for the whole show.
Wow.
Yeah, for the whole crew, for the crew and the cast, which is, again, it's like part of this. I know it's not, doesn't seem like the intersection of costumes, but it's like the role is actually creating more care for the whole team, because it's not just the actors. It's like all of us standing as bystanders watching. This stuff is uncomfortable. You know, it is not fun to watch pedophilia or a rape scene, or, you know, that is hard. So making sure that, I mean, that's part of the role, is like to bring it to light. Let's make sure we have safety around this as much as we can.
So I can't say I know this wouldn't happen, but it could possibly happen. And I just wanted to always ask, if with your costume background you happen to be working in costumes that day, and all of a sudden you hear maybe down the line they can't find an intimacy coordinator, would you then lend yourself to that as well? Because I mean, I know we're busy in one respect, but could you then say, hey, you know what, I can do both? You know, would that be something you felt comfortable with? Or?
I would not. I would probably step out of the costume department, depending on what, because likely at that moment in time, we know what we're doing costume-wise, right? And depending on what's occurring. But if something's occurring and it hasn't been planned out, then, you know, I would say to the producers, you need to take a pause here.
On the days that I've been you're the only costumer on the skeleton crew for an intimate scene, I usually give my actors a phrase, because they're not always comfortable saying, like, I'm not uncomfortable in this moment with this, but I can't say, hey, you decide in the moment. You can just say, I'm having a costume malfunction. Can I step out for a second? And then I know that we're going to step out, and it's going to be, do we need to talk to somebody else about something? Like, it very rarely has it ever been an actual costume adjustment. Mm-hmm. And I was wondering if you have like safe phrases.
I do.
Because it can be embarrassing to be like, oh, I was totally on board with this.
Yeah, I do. And often for me, I have definitely a safe phrases. And I also will just call it myself, where I'll say to the AD, I said, after this scene, we need a couple minutes. Because I can see the energy shift in the actor. And, you know, I'll just say, hey, let's take a minute. Do you want to step off? And sometimes they're fine. And sometimes they're like, you know, thank you so much. Like, I do need a minute. And
speaking of needing a minute, it's been about an hour and a half. Do you want to take about a 10-minute break? Everybody take a 10-minute break, get a snack, get a water, and then we'll come back and continue the conversation and do it.
Sure.
That's
great.
Good.
This
is great so far.
Yeah.
Oh,
my job, you know, when you're talking about like, who's this for? I was working with an actor who, there was a simulated sex scene, and he said, I'm fine with this. He goes, but I'm married. Like, so what if I get excited? And I said, yeah, it happens. We are human animals. That's normal. So it's like being able to, he was so relieved to be like, oh, okay. So I'm not like outside this. I said, it's a choice if you're consensual for this, but it's also a consideration. Like, so.
I did hear an actor being interviewed, and he said whenever he has a scene like that, he will say to his female actress, I apologize if I get an erection, and I apologize if I don't.
Well said. Right? Right? Yeah, you know, it's part of the deal.
But in those cases, when they do get excited, you say, hey, we need to step out, take a moment and let them settle themselves down? Or...
It varies. It depends what the framing is and people's comfort level. And, you know, it's really discernment. Like I have to be very discerning, but I also don't want to break the rhythm, you know, and I don't want to interrupt. Like I want people to be safe. And I have had a conversation about like, okay, this is some terminology we can use to actually say, I need some space. That's not like, I need space. And I will definitely step in and say, you know, just check. How's everybody doing?
After the take is over.
Yeah. Yeah. Usually not while they're rolling. Okay. There was one circumstance where I almost did that because I was working on Succession. And there was a scene where it was supposed to be super benign, where the girlfriend's in bed sleeping and the boyfriend leans in and he kisses her on the forehead or the cheek or something like that. And that's the end. Well, he went improv and he jumped on top of her and he put a pillow over her head. And I was like, and they were rolling. And I was like, you got to stop, like right now. Like she had no idea this was going to happen. And I was like, oh, this is so wrong. And, you know, then he literally like ran away like he was a scared puppy. Like I was going to like, you know, I was like, you just have to be transparent about what you're doing. It's okay to want to try something, but she didn't know that, you know, and that could have been massively traumatizing for her.
Wasn't that a big thing with that scene with the butter and Brando?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like she had no idea.
She had no idea at all.
I'm sorry, rewind. Butter, Brando. What's going on?
Last Tango in Paris. They filmed scenes. She was unaware of things that were actually going to happen and that did happen.
That definitely had to have some kind of coordination because I don't feel like they just. But I don't know what British rules are, so.
I'm sorry, say that again.
That you're certified intimacy coordinators, you're CIC. Is that national or international?
SAG.
Okay.
So SAG doesn't, yep, wherever SAG goes. So that's not Canada and that's not international.
I studied sociology and anthropology in the realm of human sexuality. And one of the classes that we took talked about, I believe it was like 79 different films that actually are having sex for the scene. It's not a porn, but it is kind of, the actors have agreed that they were going to have sex together and that that was just what it was going to be. And more or less that did not fly in the US, but it was more like international, very European films where that was okay. Now, art house, yeah, now we've gotten to a point where those films are many years old now. So I don't know what the new order is in other countries, but that's why it's interesting that we're coming up with solutions because as far as I knew, everybody agreed in those instances, but I don't know if there was a talk about how they were going to go about each scene, but I imagine so, but who knows? Who knows what goes on sets? So I'm happy that we now have a situation that we talk about it. Yeah.
Yeah, and like for me, I'm here to collaborate with you. And I think that creating that environment with intimacy coordinators you're working with or trying to establish that, remember that most of them do not come from costumes. So I have a unique perspective that sort of skews towards this, and experience with modesty garments because, you know, that's part of my world, but sometimes they don't.
I know that you come from a costumer background, but when you're working with an actor, do you talk to them about who's going to be applying their modesty garments and how they get applied? And do you then have a conversation with the costumer about how, you know, whether they're...
Yeah. So that definitely happens when we get down to like, okay, everybody's consented. Here we go. I will talk to them about their preferences if they've done this before. And if they haven't, I'll make some suggestions on modesty garments that we could use and work with. And if they like adhesive, like tape, or if they want to try glue, I try to veer away from glue because it's so toxic and near genitals and things like that. I don't find it. But some people are like, yeah, bring it on. So not for me. But so yes, there is that intersection of like, and then because I'm a costumer, I often end up doing the application because I'm in the union. So I will talk to customers. Would you like to do it? No, you can do it. And then on set, I will communicate with the set costumers and trailer. This is what we used. This is what I'm looking at. There might be friction. We need to be ready to reapply something. We need duplicates of this. And I will preemptively talk to costumes like because it's a simulated sex scene, it's going to get steamy. We need to think about moisture. We need to think about barriers. Barriers I usually have, but sometimes you guys are super savvy with that. And making sure that we can reapply.
Being a costume designer, I try to start that conversation in the very first fitting, like if that's in the script, if that's what's going on, and then hopefully there's an intimacy coordinator, but for most of my career there hasn't been. So it's always been me. Like I remember I had to fight to stay on a closed set, the costume designer. Didn't even want a costume or anyone on set, and I'm glad that things are changing and different now, but it's amazing how just in the last 10 years different.
Yeah, that's the closed set is definitely a piece of my work that is with nudity and intimacy, which, I work really diligently with an AD to make sure that we are on the same page about who will and will not be there and what monitors are and aren't off and the Q takes are off and so on. All of that. Yeah, and we don't need 6 producers here. You can have a writer, you can have a director.
And definitely you make sure that the costumer's there if the actor wants the costumers there as well.
Yeah, for sure. It's especially like, again, I'm a costumer, so I can hold the robe and so if it's a tight spot or, I could offer to do that. I have also had costumers who were really annoyed. Like, what are you doing? I'm like, okay. And I was like, out of context, I had to step away with this human and explain my role. And
I feel like with you, maybe that would have worked out, but every intimacy coordinator I've worked with has been just like, takes the robe away from me, doesn't even introduce themselves, doesn't even talk to me. And I'm like, I know this actress. You just showed up today. This is your first day on set. I know this person more than you do. And maybe we should ask her what she would prefer. Or him, of course. But yeah, that unfortunately, my experience with intimacy coordinators has not been good. And yeah, I would like for it to be better, yes.
Yeah, no, and thank you for bringing that up. There has been some grist as we've figured out.
Because I definitely felt like at first, you guys are taking my job, which is why I looked into doing it. Because I was like, well, if you're going to take my job, maybe I'm going to take your job.
Spicy. To piggyback off of what she said, we were having this conversation during the break that I've had the same thing happen to me where I'm like, I first of all, nobody told me there was going to be an intimacy coordinator. I just was on set ready to cover my actors and them taking things from me. And I'm like, wait, whoa, what's going on? Like, let's work together. And then kind of getting a pushback or like, well, this is my job. And I was like, I understand, but it's also my job. So let's work together. What do you need me to help you with? Because as far as at least that position, I already fitted them for their modesty outfits. I've already put everything together. I'm also the person on set. So
I'm kind of hiding in the corner waiting. You're kind of off by a monitor. Like, I'd love to be by the monitor, but that's who's going to be where. Let's work this as a set kind of position. And I don't think she really knew what was going on. And so that to get to my question is, how would you work with someone on set? Yes, you being a customer person, so you do understand, but do you go introduce yourself in the morning? Do you say, hi, I'm the intimacy coordinator, I'll be over here, I can do this or I can do that? Yeah, do you want to put them on or do you want me to put them on? Like, what?
Yeah.
What's
So
day-to-day?
so for me, and again, this is different because I come from costume. So I'm also a massive collaborator. Like, I believe creating community is the way that we're what we're meant to do as humans. Like, we're meant to like do this together. So for me, there's not like this us and them thing. And I've had that experience where I've met sus customers who are pissed off that I'm there. And that's really unfortunate because I'm not here to take anybody's job. It's a whole different role. And as just me speaking about the role for an hour, you can see like it's not your job. Like, what I'm doing is not your job.
Right. Oh, yeah.
And but I do collaborate with costume designers right out of the gate. Like, this is what's in the script. Let's talk through this. Let's talk through when we get there. Let's talk about modesty garments. The very first thing I do is get on a trailer and introduce myself. I've already talked to you. We've emailed. I've shared with you like links to modesty garments I think might be suitable for this. If you didn't have them, not to interfere, you might have your own, but here's another couple ideas if you'd like them. I usually ask to be introduced to the set people, or please let your set team know that I will be there. If need be, I am a 705 costumer. If they'd like me to hold the robe, I'm happy to. If not, we can have a conversation. I usually ask the actor, would you like me next to you, or are you okay if I'm by the monitor? Because if they're young, they often want me closer, depending if they don't have a lot of experience. There's a little bit more uncertainty. So, I don't know if that.
No, it does. Like, it doesn't feel like you're trying, or at least in my instance, I don't feel like you're trying to take my job. It's just like, where does my job begin or end? And I don't want someone to be like, well, aren't you supposed to be holding that rope? Look, sir, like, producer, whoever, you just said that, off comment. The intimacy coordinators with them, they're right next to them. I'm here just to facilitate, to help out wherever I could be needed. But I just wanted to know for like my personal, where I can stand up for myself and where I can also stand up for you if you're like, oh, they're over there, it's being.
Yeah, and like communication, and if the intimacy coordinator you're working with isn't experienced enough or isn't proactive enough for you, be the first person, make the introduction, take the lead, say, hey, say your name again. Asia, I'm Asia, I'm the set customer today. I will be with you, I'm here to support this scene. How do you like to work together?
That's exactly what I do.
Because then, yes.
What do you need me to do? I'm here, you are in charge. And then I would just help
But what it does, the gloves come off. You're diffusing it. Like, suddenly we're on the same team. And that's the whole goal, is like to create a space we're on the same team. I don't want to be like gristly with people. That's not fun. The actor feels it.
Yeah.
I'm always grateful because I'm a male customer. So if there's actors involved, I feel comfortable.
Yeah.
So I'm always grateful, and I'll go to them, what do you need me to do? And that's how it started.
It sounds like you're usually hired right in prep, but are you ever hired just as a day checker? You are. So you walk in and they've already had some other coordinator, or maybe not, or maybe they just throw you in at the last minute.
Occasionally, but I'm like, if they say, hey, we need somebody tomorrow, I'm like, can you send me the scene right now? Because if it's a nude scene or a simulated sex scene and they don't have a nudity writer, they don't have the legality to shoot it tomorrow if you're a SAG production.
So they really have to hire you like 3 days beforehand at least?
Yeah.
Okay. So that doesn't give you much time to connect with the actor and
No, I
all
mean,
of that.
it's like if you haven't had conversations with I need to talk to the creative, I need to talk to the actor, I need to talk to legal, I need to talk to costumes. Yeah, it's prep. So if they're like, we don't have any prep for an intimacy coordinator, I'm like, sorry, find somebody else, because this is a job that requires some prep. So, modesty garments. What do you want to know? What do you like? I mean, we can go through all of them. We can talk about like things that are challenging. Go through all of them. Okay, so obviously companies are coming up with different kinds of K-tape, which is great, and all sorts of colors. This is great for taping on, modesty garments.
What is K-tape? What does that mean?
Well, it's like flexible fabric tape.
Some people call it boob tape now because they've been taping up their boobs so they can wear low plungy things. And yeah.
It's like fabric tape, so you can see.
And it's adhesive on the back?
What? Nude is not just one color? Crazy.
Yeah, good luck.
Nutty.
Anybody else wanna?
And is it like a, all hypoallergenic adhesive situation?
It varies. Everybody's different. It's supposed to be, but
nothing really is.
Nothing really is.
Is there like a skin barrier that, to protect their skin if they do have sensitive skin?
I don't have an answer to that, because that's another thing on their skin that you're adhering somehow. So.
I just didn't know if you ever used it or someone suggested it or came across it.
No.
You just go for it.
I just go for it.
So do you generally use that to hold up the bust?
Oh, can hold up the bust, or if you have shabuis on, or these are this is a G-string that you can tape on, and it's got a barrier inside. There's a pocket that you can actually use this barrier. You can make a thicker barrier. Some people would prefer, you could get a piece of neoprene and cut the shape in a thicker. You could double this up. But if you're doing simulated sex, this definitely is helpful. And then you can place it depending on, the person's physique, and you can tape it all down the sides and the back.
Okay. Uncomfortable.
Yeah. It's not glamorous. And it's not sexy. But that's where we are, making movie magic. So
male and female barriers?
Yeah, this is a female one. We can pass it around if you guys want to touch, look. And then there's male barriers. So you can wash that, but do I reuse it on someone else? No. Oh no. I don't ask for them back. I don't ever want to see them again. I do the same thing with socks, bras, and underwear. If I really don't want them back. So here's a male garment, a male external genitalia garment, and they have pouches also, and there's also ones that have. How do you
Put it a tape.
Yes.
They put the tape all on the side.
Uh-huh. And then here's one with a tail that you can.
Here's a question. Which one was John Cena wearing? He had like a full back one, right? Like a front all the way to the back.
I don't remember.
And he totally covered because they went for so much legal in case it dropped and in case the envelope dropped.
Stuff I was making.
Right? So the ones with barriers are for simulated sex. And then if it's just a nude scene, you can do a pouch or a shibui. Yeah, these things. Oh, and this is a company Cuvier, that is a set customers created a lot of these modesty garments, and it's a number of these are theirs, and they it's great, small business.
Well, she said you add more padding to it if I think there is. But you mentioned something else that goes in between.
Oh yeah, like a barrier.
Yeah, is it like, I'm imagining like a sponge of some sort?
So those are, you've all seen these, right? Should we? And then these are called tuckets, and they were made for the trans community, and they are waterproof. So they're different, and they come in a bunch of different colors, and they are really great if you have a shower scene or a bath scene or something like that.
Are those full adhesive?
Full adhesive. Not comfortable, but waterproof, yeah.
Yeah, I was in the drag queen class, and they were calling them something benders. Gender benders, thank you. Yes, that's what they were calling them.
Are you discussing with actors, or do you ever come to the fittings? Because like we could also have like combo discussions about like what, like we talked about waxing or shaving because of the adhesive and things like that needs.
Yeah, I think any way we can support each other. So if you're doing fittings and you know this is on deck, say, hey, can the intimacy coordinator be present for the fitting? Start asking to incorporate us so that we can support you. It's just one thing that's happening now is just not part of the vernacular, and people aren't aware that we can begin to ask and collaborate on things.
Because I'm realizing if you have a scene where something needs to come off, and that's not always sexy, something coming off, is that like an intimacy coordinator dictating, or not dictating, but coming up with a physical plan of like, this is how we can get this off without showing the things that aren't in the writer.
Yes, this happened not long ago. I was working on a short for I don't know, somebody, and there was a scene where she was being picked up and put in a hammock, and she was going to have her legs wrapped around this guy, but her skirt was like a pencil skirt. I was like, this is never going to work. And maybe it's because I'm costumes. I was thinking about that, but I was like, you need to find I was able to get the costume designer and say, hey, this might be an issue. And then they could shift it before we actually got there. So yeah, those kinds of things happen. And like, what is she doesn't want to show anything. So making sure the bra's opaque. And these are all conversations to be had with the costumes team.
You've discussed, in a perfect world where you've gotten all the prep you need, are you getting to do that prep work and breakdown before we go to fittings? Like, could we get your notes for fittings to be like, oh yeah, we're gonna design this dress, but a slit can't go up to here because she has a scar she doesn't want to show, or like a.
Yeah, in a perfect world, yes. But I think a lot of that will come by way of us asking for each other. Like, I want to speak to the designer. Is it okay if I reach out now? Have they seen this episode? Or
well, at the very least, in the fitting, have you had a discussion with your intimacy coordinator yet?
Right, and they're like, who?
Exactly.
Then okay, we need to like.
Yeah, we could have conversations about what you're comfortable with, and we do, and we always have.
Sure.
But they, again, might not know the full legality and breadth and width of what they're allowed to ask for, or what they're, I never would have considered that sort of situation until they see a full, something that's been written up for them before and be like, check yes or no.
Yeah. Yeah, it brings up something that I've thought about a lot, that, actors don't know what they can ask for. They don't know that they can put in their contracts if there's any intimate nudity, kissing, any touching.
And that they can say no.
That they can ask for an intimacy coordinator in all their they could have their agent put it in every contract they have, so it's never even in question. Would you be logged as a personal then?
Like if you go with an actor on every shoot that they.
I guess yes. If I was working with a specific actor and they wanted me on everything, yes. Okay, barriers. Okay, so more barriers. This is kind of more things that I have used, as if you're doing simulated sex, this is kind of not your world, but it is your world. You know, you can use different things like deflated yoga balls. If you're doing simulated sex and there's thrusting and they want something between them that gives them something to push off of, but's not another body, and you can mask it depending on the framing. Say the framing is you're just seeing their back, but you want the idea of thrusting.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So would you tape this somewhere, or would you
Put it inside their?
Or it depends. It depends on them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
I often let them get. I was like, "There's there options if you wanted to try it."
we're gonna need a class.
And I wrap these up, like I'll put them inside like a cotton sock or something, and yeah.
I'm thinking all those bumps might be stimulating.
I know, that might be a little. Yeah.
Well, you can get the smooth ones too. It's all yeah.
So have you had problems with?
Did you guys see these?
With the removing the barrier that you've placed, like, or pulling up the adhesive because of the action, like these.
If things get sweaty,
Okay.
for sure. So you might need to take a break and reapply and, like, you know, just make sure that, and then this is also where we intersect, making sure we have towels and that you have enough alcohol wipes, or, you know, enough wipes so you can make sure that any sort of moisturizer's off so that the adhesive is sticking, and or hair, yeah.
Well, now I'm thinking after you've done the adhesive and you let it set, would you do like like one of those full body deodorants that helps mattify and prevent sweat so that it's not as humid?
Like a Lumi?
I don't know. Yeah, that becomes something that, yeah.
Because if you're trying to get it to not bring up or
Yeah, but we also, it depends on what the scene calls for. They may want that hot, sweaty feel.
yeah, but you wouldn't be seeing that.
But you might be seeing it all the way in their
of course.
torso.
But I mean, like say a gymnast. Like gymnasts have to spray spray adhesive to keep their leotards from riding up. So I'm thinking more along that lines of like so that the barriers and the modesty garments don't come off or ride up or.
You know, I ask the actor what their preference is, and often they're like, "Let's go with the bare minimum and then move from there." Depends on their comfort level.
Yeah.
And sometimes people are like, "Bring it on, bring me all those chemicals you got."
Is there spray adhesive specifically rather for skin?
I mean, as far as I know, in the gymnastics community, that's what they spray all around because they're flying through the air and they're doing tucks and bends and twists. They use adhesive. I think the pageant community uses it as well.
I used to use hairspray. I do burlesque, and in order to keep my bottoms from giving me a weird wedgie, I have a butt paste that I roll onto myself, and I roll it onto my fabric, and I stick it to my butt so it doesn't slide around or anything like that. Sometimes I use mustache, like a toupee. I try to stay away from spirit gum. That stings in weird areas, especially when you don't want it. But I use a butt paste, and it's literally, they sell them on Amazon. They have them for like bikinis and swimsuits. So yeah, it does not slide. It grips. It stays where it's supposed to be. It does not look like anything, because that was one of my main concerns, especially having brown skin, and most of these things were not made for my tone. It's a tinted. Okay, tinted to whose color? It's a clear one. It works. It doesn't leave a crusty, dry thing kind of situation.
So if that's like that same roll-on, it looks like a deodorant that you can get at Western for like a low-cut dress. Same kind of thing. Okay.
I get an extra, like a thicker, it's called extra strength adhesive, so that way it really doesn't move. Because sometimes, if I'm sweating or dancing or kicking or sliding, I will send it to you. I have to look at it. I can't remember it, but yeah, I'll tell you tomorrow. But yeah, it's great for just sticking it and not moving, and I don't have to worry about having a weird crusty thing on my butt. Like everyone's like, what's that crusty line on her?
Some of them are very difficult to get off.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you have to like soak it in water before, because if you just peel it off, it'll rip their skin off.
Yeah, some of the adhesive is really intense.
I use baby oil, just baby oil or a wig release. You know how the ladies are gluing their wigs down? You can use a good wig kind of solvent and you spray it and it comes right off.
Rosade remover, like something.
But these are those kinds of things for me are conversations with the actor because oftentimes people don't want that stuff near them.
Do you know what the like most, you know, natural, is there like a mineral oil or something that just
To remove it? Yeah, mineral oil.
You can use that, yeah. Might take a couple applications.
So the modesty garments that you have and the barriers that you have, these are all purchased, or have you made any of?
These are all purchasable.
Okay, and do you know how many colors they come in?
Well, here's the colors for this particular company.
Yeah, and I liked that there was a.
Yeah. Sweet. I'm like a Pantone girl. I'm like, give me the color code and the exact descriptor word.
Those go across the board with like all sorts of, you know, their nipple covers and you can do all sorts of, whether you do paper ones or adhesive ones or silicone ones, and they're different they're different dimensions, circumference. So depending on what people's preferences for coverage.
So do you have a fitting with them and talk to them about applying these things in advance?
No, usually not.
So you wouldn't really, I mean, you can set them in the room, but just say, hey, come back and talk to me.
Well, if it's my experience has been, if it's a female person, they are like, come help me. I'm fine with that. If it's a male genitalia person, they will say, I'll figure it out. And then they're sort of like, can you step in here? And they're somewhere in some stage of nudity trying to figure shit.
Okay, so all right, here is a specific occurrence of something that now I'm realizing this would be a huge collaboration. I was on a comedy last year where a guy had to run in shorts with an extended direction. Like it was just, he just had it for like 3 hours. So they got him a strap on that we had to do a fitting with, which, you know, he was fully comfortable with. But is that something we did not have an intimacy coordinator on this shoot.
Yeah, should have been.
Is that something that it would move over towards your department and then you would come to the fitting? Or is that something that like, if they said he's gonna have an extended direction for the rest of the movie, we would be like, well, that's an intimacy coordinator's.
For sure.
Okay.
For sure. Okay. So any time that you guys feel like there's a crossover, start emailing your producers, making sure that, and get a paper trail. So it's like this will require an intimacy coordinator.
Okay. And that's something that you would store and take care of and be responsible for.
It's usually props, actually. I'm like, here you go. I'm gonna let you clean that. You special effects.
For like a rising, I just saw a special effects guy do this where he has to figure out.
If it's a motion.
Yeah.
This was a stagnant situation. Good to know. Thank you. We asked a tough question.
Do you have any recommendations for, say, I know this is a very intimate question, but if a woman is on her period and she is fearful about leakage or something, like, are there other products that go with these that could, I know tampons obviously, but you know, they don't last forever.
Yeah. You usually will factor in, we're going to be taking some breaks so that you can take care of yourself. I mean, that's just not something, I mean, sure, we can do our best, but if you're mostly nude, take a break so you can take care of yourself.
As a person who has worked in a situation like that, we brainstormed the idea of just getting a panty liner and just cutting it and just placing it inside the shibui. And she was wearing a tampon too, but she was worried about leakage, and she kind of just came over to, and I was like, okay, we could try to brainstorm it. But both of us were in attendance. Or, I mean, me and the intimacy coordinator were in attendance, and we're like, girl, we get you. Like, let's try to brainstorm something. It worked for the first 2 takes, but then eventually she said, you know what, it just feels like it's sliding around a little too much. So she just kind of went comfort with the one kind of situation.
It
but I think
depends what the activity is. You know, obviously, if you're not seeing below the waist, then she can be covered. But if you are, and sometimes, and sometimes, like, I'll have those conversations with, you know, just be mindful. Is this going to be, you know, a time when you might be on your period? You know, just like be thoughtful. I want you to be, because often, you know, people feel self-conscious. They feel more bloated. They, you know, all sorts of things.
Well, and also that's not the kind of information you would share with other people on set as to why you need to stop.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that it becomes like a pretty heated situation. They're like, hey, can we take a break? Like, why?
We definitely didn't.
Well, you know, I would probably phrase it differently and say we're going to have to reset her garments. So we're going to step off. We'll be back in 5 minutes or 10 minutes. Yeah.
We're just like,
I
she
mean,
just needs to.
I don't disclose that kind of information.
I had an actress once who, I mean, she had the caliber to request this, but she does not do intimacy scenes when she's close to her period because she is very fit, that her body, her water retention, all of that changes. And she's like, trust me, you don't want me to do it either. It's not going to be the best look of me. Not everybody can make those kinds of requests, but I think it was either Hedy Lamarr or someone like that. It was like in her writer. She's like, I don't work on days where I am on my period. That used to be in her like Paramount thing, was like, those are my days off. I wish.
You wish you go harken back to 7th grade and be like, I'm not going to school today.
I'm not running the mile today.
Is there any other cool barriers that you have there, or anything new or exciting you're excited about?
Well, I'm always making them depending on what the activity is. You know, I have a whole wads of neoprene in different colors, and, you know, can make sleeves for it and different shapes. And so it really just depends, you know.
Is neoprene latex?
Neoprene is in itself, I think, separate. Yeah.
You spoke earlier about having clients in the trans community, and I was curious about binders or anything else that maybe new to some of this environment that you've learned recently about, or you've had to talk about with them about their comfortability of binding or tucking or something like that.
I haven't had too much of that in my work, but that, and really I have referred to like what they're comfortable with. You know, I really try to let them teach me because it's not my expertise. So that's, for me, something that, you know, is also like a collaboration, like, you know, especially with the gender fluid community and pronouns and how people like to be described and so on. I really I'm open to like learning, but some of it's just not my experience. So to try to educate myself and fit into a situation that's not my experience seems a little, being open to is one thing, but like it's like talking to my 16-year-old. I'll ask him like, how's B doing? How was her summer? Mom, there are they. And it's just as fluid as can be, you know, and it's like, okay, how are they? And like, or, you know, whatever it is. And it's just like, it's not the era I grew up in, but I embrace it. Like, God bless you guys. Like, they're so fluid with like, they like girls, they like boys, they like both. Who cares? It's kind of great. So it's the same with the trans community.
So I see you have mints up there.
Yes, man, you know, mouth hygiene is the mouth, you know, it's not just kissing, right? So it's like that is definitely something that, you know, mouth hygiene and making sure people are comfortable and they have a clean mouth if you're going to be kissing somebody else, and that there's mints or something available makes people more comfortable. Do you have a question?
Do actors or actresses ever have to get tested?
Yeah.
Or like, even though it's a simulation, but like, because there's such close proximity.
In terms of
That, well, even I guess with kissing too.
if there's a request for it, I definitely now I'll ask if there's kissing and they're going to be close together. I ask, would you like to be COVID tested prior to? I know. I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying. It's a little. If someone brings it up, let's just say I'm not initiating that conversation. At least I haven't been. But that's an interesting, you know, sort of legality or responsibility, because it is a liability, right?
It still exists.
Yeah, for sure they do.
So, but do you take it back to production and handle that, or you say talk to production or not?
If an actor says, "Hey, I'd like my scene partner to, I'd like to be tested. I'm happy to be tested. I'd like my scene partner to be tested," I would definitely engage then, for sure. If I'm asked, I'm going to follow through on it. Absolutely.
You wouldn't initiate it.
I haven't. I do initiate the conversation about getting COVID tested because it's so out there now. I do, if there's kissing, I definitely have said, if you have mouth sores or that's something you suffer from, this would be a really great time to proactively take any medication that you have, or be very mindful that you are going to be exposing somebody, potentially exposing some. But it's not like I'm getting an answer or I'm testing them.
Yes.
And you know, something like mouth sores or oral herpes is not something that is active if you don't have sores. So you're not going to test positive for it unless it's active.
But an actor comes in with a mouth sore day of that wasn't there.
I'm probably flagging it.
Okay, yeah. I'm like, are you saying like, hey, maybe we don't do this today? And okay.
Or if I get the sense that they're, but that's like, again, that's discrimination. If I sense they're, you know, don't seem something, you know, it's me making that assumption. So that can be dicey too, like I'm discriminating.
Well, it could also be genital herpes too.
Yes.
Well, yeah, but I'm just saying, like, what would you, like, you see it in the morning, you go, okay, maybe we don't do this today. Maybe we redirect it.
Yeah.
Which also,
I have not had that experience, but I have had a conversation about mouth sores. Oh, and especially if an actor said, hey, I'm concerned about this, or this is a consideration.
I understand sometimes actors like to get a little loose. They might drink or smoke something before scenes like this to try to make themselves more comfortable. Do you step in if you say like this person doesn't seem, they seem inebriated or they're not prepared for it? And
because for me, what that speaks to is a lack of consent. If you have to be high to participate in this activity, you haven't consented. So it goes back to, for me, consent is the understanding that unless I have a solid no in my vocabulary around this activity, there is no space for a yes. So I have to understand that I can be a no and what no means. And we have, as a culture, a hard relationship with saying no and setting those kind of boundaries. So I really try to help as actors recognize that no is really important.
I have a question about smells. I've experienced some people that really want to use only natural Tom's deodorant that doesn't work at all. And especially for an intimate scene, like some stanky dude, like how do you deal with?
Well, usually in my conversations with the actors, I'm like, we're going into an intimate scene. My recommendation is to be mindful of what you apply to your body and your personal hygiene. Be extra sensitive to taking care of yourself, and that you're going to be exposing and in close proximity to somebody else, both your mouth hygiene and your person. I don't get into it because I don't want to offend people, but I do say something to that effect. And then I have definitely dealt with the breath situation. So it's like I always offer people like a toothbrush and toothpaste and mouthwash. Like I just did that. I said, would you do it again? Just because we're just about to go to set, let's everybody just do it again. And so it's.
When you're applying the modesty garments and barrier, whether it's the K-tape, boob tape, or the actual adhesive that comes on it, we had a situation recently. If they're wearing body makeup, are you doing an alcohol prep pad and then applying it? Like, is that the only way to do it? Because I'm wondering about like tattoo coverage. Because we have people in gold body makeup.
Then you have to collaborate with makeup. And be like, okay, we need covering here, but I realize that you have covered this tattoo, and like I don't want to take that off. But how do we create it? And it might be something we do before they cover the tattoo.
Yeah, put them in the modesty garment first, and then the body makeup.
Yeah.
Then get okay.
Yeah.
So when you're in the position of applying modesty to someone, do you wear gloves?
Often I do. I say that, but not always. I definitely wash my hands because I am very tactile, and I like to use my hands. I like to, I get a different, it feels way different. It's like getting a massage with gloves. I remember when that was happening, people were doing massages with gloves. I was like, okay, I'm out. I'm totally out.
Do you try these things like on yourself and your skin? Like, do you try these things out so you can actually explain to people how they go on? Every time I get a sticky bra with a girl who's never been on a sticky bra before, and like I'm explaining how to do it, I'm like, oh, it's because I have had to use this myself.
Yeah. Yes, a lot of them I have done. The female ones I have tried. Yes. Yeah.
What's the pink thing?
What's the pink thing? Oh, it's just another one of these balls. It's bigger. It's just deflated. So that's how they come. So I come with these different balls and a pump and all sorts of, goodies. So.
Are those squishy balls the go-to industry standard for?
Well, if you're doing like thrusting sex, I mean the nice thing is that you have, as two people, you have something to push into that's not your partner.
Yeah.
So you can get a more realistic, because they're still simulated in sex, and it's like when you're trying to make something look real, it's nice if you can push into something.
Yeah. And it's just usually a child's toy.
Pillow. Pillows work.
Yeah.
But this, because it's got some resistance, is kind of nice.
What about simulated, like in water, like pools, like in the ocean?
Does it happen?
No, is that something that you're brought into?
Oh, sure.
And what do you use underwater?
Depends what the camera frame is, and what they're asking for. So we'll definitely do masking and some kind of barriers, but water creates its own issue because there's so much buoyancy and people are. I mean, I don't know if you've ever had sex in water. It's like, it sounds sexy, but it's like, you're like, can we get out of this pool? Maybe that's too much information. Sorry.
Hold on, we have a whole
Full nudity, is it true now, particularly lower half nudity, that it has to be a prosthetic or a merkin at least for coverage? Like it can't be the actual like male genitalia, like
It can be. Mm-hmm. But often they don't want it to be. You know, it's like if, you know, some A-list actors fully nude, they don't usually want their likeness out there.
Well, what was that movie with Ruffalo and was it Emma Stone?
Oh, yeah.
What was that crazy?
Poor Things.
Poor Things. Yeah, I mean, she was naked from the waist down. Then there were guys that were totally naked in the front.
Yeah, I don't know if she had a merkin or not. She may have. Yeah, merkins look real. They look very real.
I've never seen one.
You
Google it, because there's a whole history too.
Oh, really?
Oh, they're ancient. They're ancient.
Wow. Yes.
Interesting.
It's been around for a very long time.
Italian prostitute. Just not a prostitute. American Apparel got very. It's all about industry beauty standards. You gotta keep up.
Yeah, they would dye them different colors. They would.
Interesting. Halloween costume. Great, yeah.
You better have an intimacy coordinator for that.
That's what I was trying to.
Yes.
I'm going to that.
We'll figure it out.
Okay.
So what about for simulated oral sex?
Mhm.
Is it just the barrier that's on the person receiving, or is there like a mouth barrier?
That's not happening.
Ever?
It's not, they're not actually, there's no mouth to body contact happening on a genital area. There's no genital to genital contact without.
Or just like.
it's
A show I'm thinking of is what's that one on Hulu? It's college. I can't remember the name of it, but it is. You're up in there.
It's either on a prosthetic or, but it's not practical.
So that's not something that a producer should ask you for. Is what I'm saying. You know, if we're put in that position, you know, like we can say no.
Yeah.
That's not me, not my department.
Meaning what?
Well, I'm like, can we provide some coverage for this oral scene or something in terms of getting very close in there?
Yeah, I mean, there's close, but like I have helped, you know, directors reframe things so that they frame it like it looks like that, but that's not. But it's also not if you're talking about graphic, you know, close up, it's a prosthetic.
Like something like Blonde you're talking about, like there's a scene, but
I didn't get past
oh, the movie Blonde.
the one with Anna.
Yeah, it's it's a lot, but yeah, it was definitely a prosthetic. Yeah, like that. I think that's what you're talking about. But yeah, it definitely was a POV from her going down on him, and you would be his belly button like that. It probably definitely was a prosthetic. I don't know. I wasn't there, but I would assume it was a prosthetic that she was dealing with.
I wasn't there on set for it, but I worked on the.
Yeah, it was important. But do you talk to them about situations like that? Would we bring an intimacy coordinator and say, okay, you're gonna have to go down on this prosthetic, like, this is where you feel comfortable? This is so. I guess you
There's
would
consent.
say something. Yeah,
yes, for sure. There should be an intimacy coordinator there for sure, and should have been conversation about what this might look like, what the duration of it, like how interested she is in this activity, all of that.
Do you have a lot of coverings for the front? Do you have anything for if simulated sex is genital to anal. Do you have anything for the other side?
Oh, sure. Coverings? Yeah, sure. Yeah. I mean, all of these, a lot of them have tails that'll go up, covering the anus. Yeah.
And and that's more of a camera angle thing?
Yeah. Yeah. That's been my experience. That both people have barriers and modesty garments on, and then it's an angle. Yeah.
I think John Cena at the Oscars. Did you see the behind the scenes
Oh,
of John Cena?
I did.
Yeah.
I just, I'm just trying to find out, is there more that we haven't talked about?
Yeah.
So barriers and like the balls and pillows and things, are those fall under costumes or?
They should be coming from the intimacy coordinator.
But the covers can fall to costumes.
Modesty garments, yes.
Can fall to
yes.
The barriers are definitely you guys, and we both can, I guess, work with modesty coverings if we need to work in that direction.
Yeah. And barriers and the thickness, if like you want a thicker piece of barrier, say it's not simulated sex, or if you don't need a ball or something, but you want more padding. Yeah, I think they'll open it up to have conversation.
Definitely, yeah.
Are you involved in conversations about violence ever? Like if there's like choking or hair pulling or something? That's what kind of, do they have the same protections where they can be required to get an intimacy coordinator for that? Or is that only if there's nudity?
Hyperexposure is part of our role, it's all really left up to interpretation. So hyperexposure to me would be violence, even extreme yelling. If you have some abusive scene, I mean, that's hard for people to be in that space. It's hard to be on set so hold on one sec. So, for that. So yeah, I mean, I think the more we ask, can we have an intimacy coordinator present? The better. Yeah. Especially if you have like a parent yelling at a child, right? Yeah. And repeatedly, or, a volatile relationship or hair pulling or anything like that, for sure. Any sort of, I think, abusive, like for me, like the line, people ask, well, where do you step in? I said, I think anytime you're touching another person's body, either clothed or unclothed, it could be a space for an intimacy coordinator.
I just wanted a definition of hyperexposure. What is that? I thought I understood it, but with that kind of confused me. So what is hyperexposure? I mean, from what I was thinking, it was just anything that possibly might be someone topless or walking around with skin exposed to a normal amount of shorts are fine, but maybe a thong walking around would be hyperexposure. But what exactly?
Yeah, it kind of leaves the realm of nudity and simulated sex and is more of that hyperexposure of some sort of emotional abuse or physical abuse, hair pulling, choking, pushing, where...
Is it more of receiving? Like, I am receiving this hyperexposure. Like, someone's yelling at me, someone is doing something to me. Yeah. Even if it's not touching, it's about receiving some sort of trauma, sort of.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Okay.
But I would assume that it would also apply to the yeller in that situation.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Both.
Laundry, disinfecting, cleaning for things that are reusable, like say someone gets the same barrier for a whole episode or something like that. Are you, I'm assuming you're disinfecting reusable nipple covers a certain way. Are there certain products you're using, certain detergents that you like? I don't know, like an open discussion about like hypoallergenic detergents and things.
Yeah, oftentimes if it's simulated sex, I throw them out and we start over.
Even the barriers?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Some of the, I can clean some of the the balls and things like that, but I often toss the modesty garments. I'm often.
Yeah, the drawstring ones.
Yeah, I mean, you can wash them and you reuse them if you have a couple scenes, but it's like if you're using it, depends how much you're using it.
I just like I worked on a show that has like say naked werewolves constantly, and all they ever were was naked. I'm just wondering, like we had Johnny bags and things like that, but yeah, I'm just wondering if you are washing any of these or disinfecting, like the nipple covers or stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, I use alcohol wipes, and then for the washing, that I use Def. Do you know? Yeah, 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 and free and clear. I don't use any color or dye, or smell, fragrance, and then I usually air dry.
So when you pull them out of the packaging, do they go do you wash them before they go on somebody?
Not usually.
Okay.
I usually leave them in the packaging when I place them.
Okay, so they know that it's.
Yeah, yeah.
Did I hear you use the term Johnny bag?
So when I was on a show, we had some AD team that could not be appropriate, and so over the walkie they would say cocksock, and they would say it in a way that was like, we're like, okay, you can't be an adult, so we were like, why don't you say Johnny bag? Is that less funny to you? And then that just became like a terminology for a couple shows, and that was when we were making our own. We could not order any. We were making our own Johnny bags.
Okay. I didn't know if that was just a professional term I hadn't heard of. Okay.
A covering for external genitalia.
I've seen a modesty covering, and they were trying to toss it away, and we were cleaning out a space, but it was a full body kind of covering. Is that something that it was like a whole body suit that was nude coloring? Is that still something that is used, or?
I have not used that.
I just wondered if that was still something that was, because I've mostly only dealt with kind of these, but or like a nude underwear, or.
Yeah, like if they're supposed to be nude in a bed, maybe she's in a bandeau.
A bandeau, I've seen those, but this one went all the way from the neck, all the way down the arms, all the way down to the feet. And I was like, that's interesting. I wouldn't even know where the heck you would try to use that one.
Computer generate it later.
Maybe, but I was like, wouldn't you want to see some skin? I don't know where a hairless body that may not.
I think I guess that would be a conversation if the consent was, I want a full nude bodysuit. But if the vision is nudity, I don't know.
Or maybe they use it to flash somebody. I don't know, but yeah.
Okay. So I don't know if you know this answer, because again, this is relatively new, but this is something that we're fighting for. In regards to AI, sometimes you'll hear of scenes of there was some scene that Jessica Alba did a couple years ago, and it was like a shower scene, but she was wearing a full nude bathing suit, and she gave them permission to somewhat delete it in the fog of mist of the shower so that you didn't see any of that. And I'm wondering, are those the type of things now that you're including more in your writers about the modesty garments that we give them are fine, but are they allowed to digitally enhance afterwards and put on some maybe because you have body doubles obviously, but now they're able to digitally manufacture things. Yeah, I guess this is more of where the dialogue is going and what we need to watch out for as far as
that would be an agent contractual, because it's like, what do you do with the imagery and how it's manipulated is all part of that contract. But probably what I try to make sure with that, what goes to who's going to see the nude scenes in edit, that it's very specific, like who has access to that film. But outside of that, like the AI stuff and regenerating new stuff, that would be, I would imagine, be in their contract. Again, there's so much, there's such a big piece of this that the actors aren't educated to. They don't know that they can ask for an intimacy coordinator or when to ask for an intimacy coordinator. They feel like, a lot of them feel like it's an expense to production rather than protection for them. So it's a lot of reframing and education. Some colleagues and I started a podcast. We've completed season 1 about intimacy coordinating. It's called Romancing the Screen.
That's a great name.
Yeah. And we're just about to launch season 2. And it really was, the genesis of it was that we were finding so much grist and pushback in production with a lot of the things that we talked about, as how, because we landed with such force that, and a lot of it, so much of it wasn't normalized and people didn't know what they were doing on both sides of it, that I was like, we have to create warm conversations. They have to be conversations about collaboration. It's not like, this is what I do. And so we created this podcast, and we've interviewed directors and actors, and we've had a couple costumers come in, and we will continue to do that, and like how we can support each other and where we intersect. And so if that's useful to you, yeah.
Are you guys, like intimacy coordinators, collectively being educated on what was in the new contracts in terms of AI protections and intimacy coordinator regulations, and so that if there's a person on set, we can go to you and say, hey, what's the rule? Or
in a perfect world, it's like, actors understanding what's in the SAG contract. Most of them don't know. Their agents hopefully know. Their legal team really should know. But the nuances of it are really very person to person. Depends. Like, I'm not somebody who reads instructions. Like I get the car manual. They're like, did you read the, I'm like, no. But that I'm, a right brain person. So, no. So I think it just depends on the human.
Yeah. Is there something, especially coming from both sides, is there something that you think costumers, especially set costumers, we should know about your job and your position that would help you out even more?
I think just to have the spirit of collaboration, and that we're here for, we're here to support this vision. That's why we do this work, because we get to be collaborative and creative together. And hopefully that's what you're met with, is someone who's open-hearted and like, yeah, like, how can I support you? On set, we are working really close together. And the more we can support that, the better off the project is and the more fun we have.
This feels like a pretty good place to wrap up, I think. Unless anybody has maybe 1 or 2 more questions.
No, that was great.
Yeah, that was incredibly informative.
I'm so glad. Thank you. Thank you.